Okay, so I wanted to go over some of the stuff that, again, like we would have been doing in class if I was here. So after we already completed the chart for Christianity, and after we did the other day, we completed the chart for Islam. Here's just a couple of other religions that you guys can fill in, just while I'm not here to make sure that we don't fall behind. So the next of the religions that we go over is Judaism. And Judaism's at the top of the chart. And if you notice, I put that Judaism is number one, then I had Christianity as number two, and then I had Islam as number three. And that is because both both Islam and Christianity trace their religions back to Judaism. So with that, the one thing that makes this different is that Judaism is considered an ethnic religion. So let's go ahead and very quickly kind of get into this. And just while you guys are listening, you want to be filling this stuff in on the chart. And the way that I'm going to be saying it, the wording I'm going to be, kind of using, that's the kind of wording they're going to use on the test. So it's not something I suggest just kind of Googling and looking up. So here we go. Let me go ahead and get you guys everything here. Okay. So as far as what type of religion is it? It's ethnic. It's one of the religions where it starts in the hearth and it pretty much stays by the hearth. So the hearth for Judaism is still considered Israel. They may also word that then as the Middle East or Southwest Asia. Either one of those would be correct. So being more specific, Israel would be the hearth, present day Israel. Or they could say the Middle East, or they could say Southwest Asia, and all of those are correct. If you look on here too, you'll see where it says founder Abraham. If you ever see the terms Abrahamic religion, or even if I even say Abrahamic religions, Abraham is considered the father of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. He's the founder for Judaism, but considered the father of all three, which again, they're all three connected. So with that, it's an ethnic religion. The only way that it's going to end up diffusing then is through relocation diffusion. So all ethnic religions actually only diffuse by relocation diffusion. And on this slide, you'll notice that it says Jewish diaspora. A diaspora is any time like a group of people are forced out of an area. So the Jewish diaspora pretty much just refers to a time when the Jewish people were forced out of their homeland, and then later on they were forced out of Russia, and later on they were forced out of Egypt. Like any time basically that the Jewish population was forced out of a place in large numbers, that's known as a diaspora. So you're going to see, again, that goes with relocation diffusion because people are actually moving out of an area, going to another, retaining their culture, etc. And because it's ethnic, they're not widespread, but they're also not actively seeking converts. So a lot of times with this religion, if you do, want to be Jewish or whatever, you would have to convert. So conversion is the way that you would get into Judaism, but it's not like they're actively seeking converts. It would have to be on somebody's own just kind of choice and free will. Then going into like where it's mainly located today, because it's an ethnic religion, it's going to be mainly still clustered by the hearth. But so we're on the chart where it says mainly located. You want to make sure that you have present day Israel, but you also want to make sure to have the following. I would add in, and I may have a map here. I don't know if I did. Okay, so yeah, you may want to have the following places. Besides just Israel, you want to have parts of the United States, like specifically in New York and South Florida. So what I'm doing are just like the big pockets of where Jewish people moved. So in the United States, New York area, so like the Northeast, as well as South Florida. And you're also going to see, and you can kind of see everything right here where I have it, but you can kind of also notice that there's a lot in South America as well. You have people in Argentina that are Jewish in large numbers, Brazil in large numbers that are Jewish. So those are some pretty big places there. So you've got Israel. That's where they're mainly located. But also you'll see pockets around the world in like New York or the Northeast US. You'll see in South Florida. And you will also see in places like Argentina and Brazil. With that, a place of worship can be either known as a synagogue or a temple. So I think I had already filled that in for you guys there. That's just a place of worship, not a sacred site. This goes into your sacred sites. So for sacred sites for Judaism, you must know the Western Wall. And I have two pictures on here of the wall. So the top one is a more close-up kind of view. And then the second picture that you see is just kind of from farther away. I don't know if on the exam they would have this, but with the Western Wall, well, this is located in Jerusalem, so please make sure you know that. The Western Wall is in Jerusalem, in Israel, directly on the other side of Al-Aqsa Mosque, which was one of the more sacred sites in Islam. But if you ever see a picture on the test of what looks like a wall and little pieces of paper shoved in the wall, that's the Western Wall. Because for those of you that have been, you may have seen this, but the Western Wall, it said that if you write down a prayer that you want to come true, that if you put that on a sheet of paper, roll it up and put it inside like cracks in the wall, then God will answer your prayers. So if you do ever see a picture on the test and they're asking about sacred sites or religion with that picture, and it's a wall with like paper in it, it's the Western Wall. And then you also can see a couple of cultural traits on here as well that go with Judaism. So on the top picture, you'll notice the yarmulke. That's the head covering for men. You do not see all Jewish people walking around with a yarmulke on their head. However, if you do go into like a temple synagogue for a service or something, you will end up having to cover your head. And even women will cover like their hair as well. Another thing, though, is that if you're strictly Orthodox, which is like a branch for Judaism, and you don't need to know branches for Judaism for this class, but there is a branch of Judaism that is very, it's more like strict and fundamental, and so they'll be like wearing yarmulkes year round, kind of a thing. But at any of your sacred sites, you definitely want to wear one. The other thing is that it is for women, and we kind of talked about this with Islam, but this really goes with any religion. If you're Orthodox, meaning like you're really, really more, I don't want to say fundamental, but like you're more strict when it comes to religion, like you really are following it. Orthodox men, again, will wear the yarmulkes like all the time. And then Orthodox women are told to dress modestly, meaning covering the shoulders, covering pretty much everything down to the ankles. Basically, if you are Jewish, think of like walking into a temple, you know, what you would walk in there wearing versus what you would not. So it's just kind of saying that the more Orthodox or the more people follow this faith, the more they're going to be covered. And that's something that I would just kind of know with any religion, because that's something that you'll kind of see, is that the more Orthodox or more that they follow it strictly, the more covered people tend to be when they're with like what they're wearing. And as far as something that's also a culture trait, and it coincides with Islam, is that you're not supposed to eat pork. Pork is considered a taboo in Judaism, and you are also not supposed to like mix your meats and your milks. That's called keeping kosher. And again, a taboo is something that culturally you're really not supposed to do. Like it's a cultural rule that you don't do it. It's not a law like written into the legal books or anything like that, but it's just something culturally you're not supposed to do. So you're not supposed to eat pork, and you are supposed to keep kosher. Does that mean that every person that is Jewish does? No, it just means that that's what you're supposed to do, and it's taboo if you do not. The only other thing I would say with Judaism for right now to make sure to know is that the language that goes with Judaism is Hebrew. I would also make sure to know that to associate with Islam, the language that goes with that is Arabic, which we kind of talked about the other day. But so some religions will have languages that do go with it. So Hebrew goes with Judaism. You can see it over here. And then Arabic goes with Islam. Both of those languages are considered Semitic languages. If you take a look at the language tree when you get a chance, you'll see it's on the Semitic branch. Okay, so then for this one, these aren't exactly branches of Judaism, but what they are like these kind of divisions of the Jewish population. So whether or not you want to throw this in branches on the chart, you can, or you can just put this in the binder somewhere. But geographically speaking, there are what we call like two main geographic divisions of Jewish people. One is Sephardic and one is Ashkenazi. If you guys have ever heard those terms before, you know, you'll kind of understand where I'm coming from here. But if you take a look at the picture here, so any of the Jewish people that used to live in Eastern Europe, or even I guess still do, but if they can trace their lineage back to Eastern Europe, then they're considered what are called Ashkenazi. Anybody that can trace and is Jewish that can trace their lineage to Spain is considered Sephardic. And here's why. And this is actually where my former last name, Al-Bahay, actually came from. So with Ashkenazi Jews, those are most of the people that lived in Europe for quite some time. Usually they either were kicked out of Russia, moved into Europe, or had just, you know, lived there for a while. And unfortunately, it was also a lot of Ashkenazi Jews that ended up in the throes of World War II and the Holocaust and everything. And many of them did leave Eastern Europe after that. But anybody who can trace their lineage to Eastern Europe, Ashkenazi Jewish. However, what happened with Sephardic is, and this is actually the history of my family. So, and those of you guys know me as Mrs. Coyle, my old name was Miss Albahay, and I was Albahay for 41 years of my life there, which that name, and I put it up here, you can kind of see it's not that it looks Jewish. There's certain names that you'd associate mainly with Jewish populations. There's certain names you'll associate with Eastern European populations. It doesn't necessarily have to mean a certain religion, but your last name can kind of give away a little bit about where you're from. And so with my family, they lived over here in Spain for, and this is like years, like hundreds and hundreds of years ago. My family lived in Spain, and there was this time period you'll learn about in AP World when the Jewish people, the Islamic people, and the Christian people pretty much all lived in peace and harmony in southern Spain. However, Spain is an extremely Catholic country. And at one time or another, like you'll learn about this in AP World, but at one time in history, Spain actually decided that instead of allowing everybody to live in peace with diversity, they wanted to make the entire country Catholic. And if you did not want to convert to Catholicism, like Christianity and then Catholicism, then you had to leave the country or you were basically tortured or killed. So my family went from southern Spain down to Morocco, which is right there. Like it's a very short journey across from Spain right there to Morocco right there. And then what they had to do was they had to kind of make their way across Northern Africa over here. This is my family to the Middle East. Then my family they settled in Turkey and in Greece. But when the people that lived in Spain left because they didn't want to convert to Catholicism if they were Jewish, that group is known as Sephardic. And as far as like a lot of the main differences between the two, it's not just geographic, because when my family and anybody else that was, living in that area and left Spain to go to the Middle East, the main religion in the Middle East is Islam. In North Africa as well, like Islam. So when my family went there, we actually really picked up a lot of the culture traits in the Islamic faith. So and it's kind of like acculturation a little bit, because like when my family went to North Africa, we tried to blend in a little bit as much as, blend in as much as we could. So we still retained aspects of our Jewish faith, but there's also a lot of things that we do that are more like you'd associate with the Islamic faith. Like at a lot of our gatherings for family, we'll have Middle Eastern belly dancers that will dance. Again, we settled in Greece and in Turkey. So I have a lot of family that we still do like the breaking of the plates for like celebrations and things like that. A lot of the foods that we eat in my family and a lot of Sephardic families are going to be more like Middle Eastern food than anything else. So there's a distinct geographic difference and a little bit of a difference between the Sephardic and Ashkenazi ways of like celebrating, I guess is the way to put it. Ashkenazi Jews are not going to, sit there with belly dancers at their things. They're not going to have a lot of Middle Eastern foods as staple foods, whereas a lot of the Sephardic people will, because they had to acculturate as they were in the Middle East over here, like North Africa and Southwest Asia. So those are just two geographic differences. They're not branches. They're just geographic differences. Showing this image, and I've shown it a couple of times in class, but that right there in the center with the gold dome, that is the Dome of the Rock, also known as Al-Aqsa Mosque. For those of you that have ever been to Israel, like to the Old City area, then you'll know what this is. But just to give you an idea of how close together sacred sites are in all three of those faiths, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. Here's Al-Aqsa Mosque for Islam. This is the Western Wall for Judaism. And then you can't really see it in the picture, but like just to give you an idea, like that would be like about how far away from the wall and the mosque the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is. So Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have holy sites in Jerusalem, in Israel, and very, very, very close to one another. So that can cause some real big tension when you have these three religious faiths that have really important sacred sites all within a couple of blocks of each other. So I would just keep that in the back of my mind. As far as mainly located today, again, I kind of already did that. So the entire thing for Judaism should really be filled in there. The last thing really that you have to know about is something called the Jewish diaspora. And this is something to where you can read everything that's on here, but what it basically means is diaspora just by itself means that a group of people were forcefully like basically pushed out of an area where they live in a large group. And unfortunately, throughout history, and again, you'll go more into this in World next year, but unfortunately in history, you're going to see that the Jews have absolutely had to, they've been pushed out of certain places where they've lived before. Here's just a couple of the examples there. So what I would just say is maybe know what know what diaspora means, and just kind of know the fact that the Jews have been persecuted pretty much through various times throughout history. At one point, they were driven out of Israel by people. At one point, they were driven out of Egypt. At one point, they were driven out of Russia. I mean, there's like a whole history to this. I can't go into it because I just don't have time. So just kind of know that diaspora means a whole group of people that are pushed out of an area against their will. And this did happen to the Jewish population. It's known as the Jewish diaspora. That you can throw kind of in your notes or anywhere if it fits on the back of the chart would be fine. This is just showing you percentage of Jewish population across the United States. So again, the darker the color, the more of something. So you're going to have a pretty large concentration of Jewish population down here in South Florida and also up here in the Northeast. So that's just showing you like in the United States. So now we're going to go into so the Sikhs, if you go down to the bottom, I'll do this one really, really quickly for you, and then I'm going to move on to two of the other ones here. Well, maybe one of the other ones. We'll kind of see how far I get. So Sikhism, or the Sikhs, this is all the way at the bottom on your chart. This is a universalizing religion, and I did put that in there, but what I did not put is that it happens to be the newest universalizing religion in the world. And the location for the Sikhs is right here where the purple area kind of is. They're basically sandwiched between like India and Pakistan. And it's in this region called Punjab province. And this religion actually began in around the 1400s. But because of the really large number of followers, it is considered the world's 5th largest religion at the moment. Where they mainly live is going to be pretty much still in Punjab province, but you're also going to see, if you take a look at the map on the bottom, you'll see there have been a lot of people from the Sikh faith that moved to parts of the United States, specifically places like New York. There's also a lot in Canada, and you also see a huge amount pretty much in Australia. And then obviously India is like the darkest color there because that's where Punjab province is. But that's pretty much where you're going to see most of the Sikh population. Now, with that, what they are is something called a syncretic religion. Syncretism, and we kind of talked about this a little bit when I introduced Unit 3, but the definition of syncretism, I would actually put in your notebook if you don't have it there. What it means is if you have syncretism or a syncretic religion, it means that elements from one religion blend with elements from another religion, and they form a brand new religion. So kind of like how Creole languages was like one language, another language, they blend together and they form a new language. This goes with religions. So syncretism goes with religions. Creolization or Creole will go with languages. So what Sikhism is basically this syncretic religion because it takes elements from Hinduism and elements from is the Islamic faith, and it kind of blends them together. A major culture trait of the Sikhs is the fact that, and sorry about the whole culture, I should just say culture, but culture trait is the fact that they wear the turban. So underneath they have uncut hair and all that, but you'll see a turban on them. I do remember after September 11th, 2001, there was, a lot of sentiment against the Al-Qaeda terrorist organization that did hit us on 9/11. Unfortunately, a lot of people mistook the Sikh population for the terrorist organization Al-Qaeda that had hit us. And I believe there was a man who was running, I think it was like a gas station or a convenience store or something like that, who was Sikh, and he had a turban on, and he was actually the target of a lot of violence because people did not know the difference between the terrorist organization that hit us on 9/11. They just saw, like a turban, and they thought, oh, it's got to be, you've got to be part of that group. And absolutely not. This is some of the most, again, like peaceful, ideology beliefs in the world. So a major culture trait is going to be the turban that you're going to see. Many times the men will have long beards, mustaches, uncut hair, and the turban it's pretty significant. You're going to see it on men, and then women tend to have their hair covered. So those are some culture traits I would know for Sikhism. And then as far as a sacred site, I do not think I filled this part in. You do need to know that the Golden Temple, pictured here, is considered a sacred site in Sikhism. So, and I would know that that's in Punjab province in India. There are no branches that you're going to need to know. A place of worship is just a temple in general. So if you wanted, you could put that in the column. So temple is just the place of worship. The sacred site is the Golden Temple, which is located in Punjab province, and you can see it here. There's no branches you have to worry about. As far as how Sikhism diffused, again, because it is universalizing, you can say a lot of it was actually due to relocation diffusion, like a lot, and that would be fine. So even though it's universalizing, and usually there's various ways that religions will diffuse, the biggest one for this was relocation diffusion. So that's Sikhism. And then going into Hinduism. Okay, you know what? I'm going to stop it there for right now because I want you guys to be able to fill everything in that I just mentioned into the chart. And then I will do a second one with Hinduism and Buddhism. So let me just end that right there and make sure you get everything into the charts. And I tried to do everything that I would do in class because I don't want anybody behind. As far as Hinduism, Buddhism, those two are going to be pretty important. For Confucianism and for Taoism, those I'll also kind of breeze through because recently they haven't been asked about too much, and they're not quite religions. They're more of like a way of life. So I'll end this here, and then I'll see if I can upload a second one with a little bit more information for you guys. Happy Friday. And please, please, please make sure if you need, go back in this video, stop it wherever you need, make sure your chart has all the information that I was speaking about, and put a couple of little things over in your binder, and I will see you guys next week.